This is a video of a talk from Crater Remote Conf given to a live audience in February 2016. This video was made possible by sponsors like Modulus.io, okgrow.com, and spacedojo.com. If you would like to find out more information about upcoming conferences, be sure to go to conf.crater.io and put your email in the form that pops up in the lower left corner. Enjoy the video. Welcome to Crater Conf Day 3. We're going to kick off the day with a talk about Flux. We have Abhi Aiyer with us. Welcome, Abhi.
Hey, guys.
You work at Workpop, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess I'll turn it over to you. I know you guys are you guys hiring right now?
Yes, we are. And I actually have a whole slide about Workpop, so
Awesome.
we'll
All
get
right.
into that.
Sounds good.
Okay, before I start, I want to change my screen sharing options. Are you guys looking at myself right now? How do I do that, Josh?
I don't know what you mean. Here,
Look.
I can change it. Here, like that?
Whoa.
Yeah, trippy.
I just want to share one window.
Oh, I don't know. That's not super easy to do.
All right, whatever. Let's just get on with the show then.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Before I start, just want to say thanks to Josh for having me. As he knows, I love talking about software. I love talking about product. I love talking about engineering. And that's why I wanted to come on the CreatorConf. This is awesome, and I hope everyone enjoys this talk. My talk is called "When the World is in Flux, You'll Be Fine," and this talk just came out of the fact that so much in the software engineering world is changing right now, and it's always changing. So like people are really just like scared, or they're like up in disarray because they don't know where this boat is headed. So before we get into that, I am Abhi Aiyer. I'm a software engineer at Workpop. Workpop is a job hiring solution for both candidates and employers. We're based in Los Angeles, California. We're live all in Southern California and soon to be expanding nationwide. We raised $7.9 million, just throwing that out there, and we are hiring. Our app is made in meteor.js, and we use react.js on the front end. And we also do native Android and iOS for our apps as well. A lot of Meteor apps are like Cordova, and we took a new spin and we wanted to do fully native. So we've done some cool things there. If you're not into Meteor, it's a really good framework, and I suggest you take a look at that. Okay, so let's get into it. What's the problem today? There's a huge problem, right? And software engineering is always changing. That is the problem. Everything is changing. Every week there's a new framework. Every month there's a new podcast coming out. And what do we do with all this change? Like, just shoot me. Seriously, shoot me. Because every time I learn something, it changes the next day. And how am I ever going to become a master of this if everything is always changing, right? That's how we all feel right now. And this is the issue we face, right? There are 14 competing standards right now. Someone wants to unify them. Well, now there's 15 competing standards because the communities that we're in have so many different opinions, right? It's tough, right? And there's this thing called JavaScript fatigue, right? JavaScript fatigue. Look at this. There's so many tools right here. Babel, ES6, Webpack, NPM, React. Like all these things, all these buzzwords that you need to be aware of, because that's what people think that you need to know to get a great job in the software industry. It is fatigue, right? So things constantly change. If they're constantly changing, how do we manage complexity, right? As software engineers, this is a great quote from Steve McConnell. If you've never read Code Complete, it is such a great book. It's just about how you should think about software process. But this great quote is, managing complexity is the most important technical topic in software development. It's so important. This is our job. Our job is to manage complicated shit so other people don't have to, right? That's what this really says. So let's talk about architecture. That's what we got to talk about today. So there's two things going on, right? There's frameworks and there's business logic, right? So let's talk about business logic first. Business logic is the stuff in your application that is specific to your problem that you're solving or your business, right? For example, in Workpop, our business logic surrounds cool little functions that help people apply to jobs, help people message candidates, all this stuff that is so Workpop specific that it has its own structure, right? It's not a framework per se, but maybe there could be frameworks built upon it in a Workpop sense, right? But our business logic is completely different from the framework we use. We use Meteor, we use React, we use Redux. Like, we use all these libraries and frameworks that help organize our business logic. But the problem that I see in other applications that I look at, or other people's code that I review, this concept is mixed. People are putting business logic in their frameworks, right? You can go and see some jQuery spaghetti code. You'll see some AJAX requests in there. There's some buttons toggling on and off, like in the same function call. There's a lot of crazy stuff that gets mixed. And so when frameworks change, you get this, you say this, right? Ah, fuck. Frameworks always change, FAC. And yeah, that's all I can say about that. Frameworks are always going to change. So let's get into the solutions. Let's stop complaining for a bit. I think I complained a lot. Let's get into what we can do, okay? So I'm always about actions. Actions are everything. So this is the one thing that my mentor has always taught me: methods over results. How you do something is more important than the outcome, right? This is why a lot of these frameworks get us like so caught up, is because we're always worrying about what the framework can do for us at the outcome. Meteor solved this great problem of, having database everywhere, right? The data on the client and the server are synced, but there was no like understanding of like maintainable patterns to do this type of work, right? And so when things change on you, you're kind of lost, right? You're worried about what this thing could have done rather than how it did it. So at Workpop, and personally, I advise, you should write and maintain patterns. Okay, so that's some things that maybe you and your team decide that are good for you. Like things that you all can get around. So your code starts looking the same, comprehending the same. It's great. You should decouple your systems, right? If you have a complicated system that literally is different pieces that you just put in a monolith, decouple that. A good example of that is microservices. That's a great buzzword, right? But it's really decoupling a huge system into really like understandable chunks. And just understand every piece of code you write in a system, or in the front end or whatever, they're all cogs in a machine, right? We need to think about how we do things overall. That's how the application is going to be built. The application is the machine, and the things that we build are the cogs in that machine. And as a developer, you are responsible for making the cogs turn. So how you do stuff is way more important than the result. All right, so let's get into some design patterns. This is enough philosophy. I didn't create design patterns like the Gang of Four did, and there's a great book by Adi Osmani called JavaScript Design Patterns. And since we're all JavaScript developers, I hope you've read that book. But in case you haven't, like 2 patterns we use at Workpop to really just make us develop at high speed is the command pattern, right? So the command pattern is a really interesting pattern. because it allows you to separate your responsibilities between code, right? It really has a delegation type. I don't know how to explain it. Really, it's like you have a couple of objects that are delegating actions to other things, and this is really at the root of Flux. Like Flux, the architecture from Facebook, this is the root of Flux right here. So let's get into an example, right? Let's say you're running a grocery store, okay? And this grocery store has a store manager, right? And we would represent that store manager as an object that has a couple methods, right? You can request an inventory list, you can buy inventory, you can restock shelves, and they do their certain things. And this is a logical way to approach representing a store manager, right? But why is this bad? Like, what is wrong with this, right? We have this store manager, logically has all the methods he could do, right? Logically, everything is here. What is wrong with this thing? Let's think about this. If the core API changes about a store manager, like he got a promotion and he can do more things, like instead of buying inventory, for him, buying inventory actually means maybe clicking a button on his computer instead of having to go to the store, right? The API has changed underneath. So anywhere we place the store manager and his responsibilities, we have to go modify, right? And maybe we've mutated things here and there that we don't have the control over. Writing tests helps, but doesn't, like, you can write as many tests as you want, but if you break the API, you're gonna have to fix the test. So I think my advice is to abstract the API away from these interfaces. So the command pattern, what you do is you have this store manager and there are certain tasks to be done, right? Buy inventory is one of them, right? Or request inventory list. These are actions that a store manager could do, right? It doesn't mean that he has to do them, or it doesn't mean that the janitor couldn't buy inventory. It's just something that it's just an action that a object can do. And the great thing about that is you register these actions to like a manager list, what actions can possibly be done, and the store manager can then execute those, right? And this is kind of like Flux right here. You can start seeing that where you have some type of object dispatching some action with parameters, and then the underlying functions get called. The great thing about this is we can get into some Flux, right? So this is some Flux right here, right? I work at Costco. I got my Costco dispatcher. And a dispatcher is something that sends messages. It's like an event bus, kind of. And there's a concept in Flux called a store, right? And good thing we're talking about Costco. It's a really big store. We have this thing called the TV store. And the TV store here, it has an item called a TV. It's very simple, right? And when you want to select the TV to buy, right? You would dispatch some action, and this is the signature here, Costco dispatcher dot dispatch, right? This is the dispatcher instance. We're going to send some action type. In this case, I just said item update. A lot of you might be cringing at the fact that there are some open strings here. I did too. Putting strings out, constants like that, it seems kind of archaic, right? But after you get used to it and understand that these are serializable strings that are human readable, that you can understand, you can start making some enums or something to help manage this complexity. But then you can have very descriptive actions, right? Item update, to be honest, I'm sorry guys, that's a shitty name for an action. I probably should have said update or select the TV, something very descriptive. So if any other developer came and worked with me, they would not think I'm some guy who speaks some random language, right? Like literally, it's as descriptive as you can, and as brief as you can, and that conveys a lot. It conveys what is going on. Note that we haven't done any business logic yet. We have not done anything yet. So our selected item, that's a Samsung television. I heard it's a good TV, and that's the whole dispatch process. That's the command pattern. That's our instance dispatching something. Now we have to actually talk about business logic here, right? Well, the business logic gets registered to the dispatcher, right? So whenever the dispatcher gets some serializable action, it's going to do something with it, right? And in vanilla Flux, what you do is you register business logic, functions, whatever, what have you, to the dispatcher. So it knows when it gets certain actions, it'll do that. And that's very reminiscent of the command pattern right there as well. So that's some Flux, okay? I could have gone deeper, but we have a lot to cover, so we're going to keep going. Let's talk about Redux. Redux is really blowing up right now, and I've fallen in love with it. And there are a lot of haters out there. That's okay, but I love Redux, and I'll tell you why. At Workpop today, or before Redux, we were using this front-end framework called Blaze, had no structure for client-side data management. Seriously, it was the wild west. They didn't tell us what to do, which is okay. It allows you to make your own opinions and stuff. But in reality, it'd be nice to follow some type of guidelines, right? And you don't want competing architectures. The great thing about Flux in general is it stirred a bunch of different libraries to achieve the same problem. And they solve these problems in different ways, but people were getting fatigued by that, right? The great thing about Redux is it seems to have been getting so much heat in a good way that it's starting to become a de facto solution. So if you guys are interested in doing things the Flux way, I really suggest you start with Redux, and you probably will just end with Redux. Even Pete Hunt on GitHub, he has this learn React, a couple steps to learn React. I covered this on a Ben and Abhi show, and he said you should just start with Redux. It's the most popular one right now, and you should just go with it because that's what the most people are going to be doing. So that's my advice. Take it as you take it, whatever. Just take it. So let's get into Redux. Redux flips this command pattern, or even the command pattern and Flux a little bit differently, right? So let's look at this Flux example. Before we had a dispatcher and a store, and in Redux, we just have a store, and you really don't know where's the dispatcher at. That's because there is no dispatcher in Redux. Redux handles things actually completely different than a traditional Flux dispatcher setup, right? There is no dispatcher. There is no registration of functions to the dispatcher. There are no mutations in the dispatch process. And let me explain why. And I'm going to go through this example just so you can visualize this. Just start, look at the picture and stuff. So these two gray bubbles could confuse you because usually they would be client versus server. This is actually all on the client, right? The bottom gray rectangle thing, that's the UI layer, right? This is the UI, and we have this thing called the provider, okay? I'll come back to that. So the top here is the Redux layer. This is the state management layer, okay? And we have this thing called the store. And let's start at the store. The store is where your client-side state is. You can see the state right next to the store. It's right here in orange. This is the state of the application, okay? Now, when you want your UI components, obviously need to know the state of the application so they can render some pretty screens to your users. So the store pushes this state down to something called the provider. The provider is like a binding to the store. It speaks the store's language, and it also speaks React, right? It speaks the store's language and it speaks React. So what it can do is it can translate what the store said and push it into React views, right? And that's this dark blue thing here is called connect. And that is this process layer right here that says, hey, I'm speaking Redux right now. And connect is like, oh yeah, I understand that. Let me connect it to the React view. So you can see now we've connected the state of the store to our React view. Okay, let's go to this React component right here. Now, as opposed to having a dispatch, right, from our dispatcher, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to do the same type of dispatch. Because I am connected and I speak the store's language and the store speaks React, I can actually emit a dispatch from the store itself. That's why the cool thing about Redux is there's no dispatcher. The store takes that responsibility from dispatcher. So that means you're worrying about less interfaces, right? You're only worrying about this single source of truth that has multiple responsibilities, but the way it handles these responsibilities is very elegant, actually. So this component is going to dispatch some arbitrary action at this point, who cares? And it's going to go through something called the middlewares. So middlewares are cool. This is like anyone who's into Redux or Flux has seen this time travel debugger, the react.js Europe talk where people saw hot reloading and time travel. Well, what Dan was showing was the middleware, right? And Redux comes with this thing called Redux Logger. And Redux Logger is great because it just shows you what dispatches are happening and what the result of them were. So they hit this middleware. The middleware then sends it to these really, really intimidating red pills here called the reducers. Now, these are super intimidating. Anybody I've taught Redux to is so intimidated by these. Maybe because they're red, I don't know. Or maybe because they represent something that's very complex. A reducer in Redux is a function. And all it does is it describes the state at the current moment, right? And you can see that there are multiple red ones because they represent slices of this square, the state. If I took a knife and I cut the state into little pieces, what would happen is you would end up with reducers. You would end up with these red things here, each responsible for a single part of the state tree. So let's say I have a state that opens a modal. Modal open is the state, and modal close is the other state, right? If I sliced my state tree, I would have a reducer for modal open, right? Or for the modal process. And inside this state, it would handle any state change that could happen to a modal. It could be modal open, modal closed, modal reanimated, all these states. And once the action hits this reducer, let's say we're doing the modal open. Okay, the modal open is hit this reducer, it changes the state, the store pushes it back down to the provider, and now all the components speak the store's language and they're updated to it. So that's also a very unidirectional flow, right? And that's what Flux is all about, that's what Redux is all about, is how can we make the circle of life make sense in the life cycle of our UI. And the great thing about this is you can see here, the UI, the framework, the React.js level is right here. And it's split by your business logic, which is here, right? Now, that's awesome. It's separation of concerns. And even within this state management layer, you can split your business logic even further by splitting this Redux stuff with your actual business specific stuff. It's great. And I think it's the way that we should be developing things. All right, let's keep going. This is just a closer look at Redux. I explained to you verbally what everything was, but this is some code, right? So I talked about a reducer, the scary reducers, all right? You can see the reducer is just a function. It takes a state, it takes an action, right? The action is something that the UI component sent saying like, hey, I want the modal to be opened. In this case, we did an initialization, right? So this is the whole, like, people are scared of strings thing still. Redux does not get away with that. So Flux and Redux do these switch statements. Switch statements aren't all that bad, you know. I got used to them. So the reducer is going to take these actions, right? So we have action.type. We have one for initialization. We have one for update. It's going to take these guys, and it's just going to return a new state. You can see that we haven't mutated anything in this, right? We said initialization. Oh, okay, so some data came in from this parameter, and we're just returning it. Nothing was mutated. And even here, in this update case, we're actually returning a new object with the data of the state and the action of that data. So we're never mutating anything. And the great thing about that is that's how you can really always tell the state of the store at any given time. So here we're just creating a store. There's this function called create store. You put in a reducer, it bootstraps a store. This is a very, very simple example that like Redux is very complex. I just did a very simple example, so I don't want to fool you in thinking it's like really easy. It has a learning curve, but this is just like some basic concepts. Then down here we have a stateless React component, and on click the store is just dispatching an update with some data, right? I gave it the data, sample data, and you know what would happen now is it would hit this reducer. It would say, okay, I'm doing the update. Okay, great, update section. Okay, oh yeah, I'm going to return a new object with sample data in it. Cool. And then whatever component was going to be listening to this, I probably should have put that in this example, but whatever component should be listening to this will then pick it up, and then you could have had that state change that said like, hey, right here. I should have put that in the example. My bad, guys. Okay. So that's the observer pattern. Hopefully most of you guys aren't sleeping right now because it's about to get a little interesting. We're going to talk about a little server-side stuff because that was just client-side stuff. Server-side stuff, we could still like take all of this like separation of concerns and like design patterns into consideration. So I'm going to tell you guys a story that plagued Workpop for like 3 months when we had this. Let me get back into it.
So you just said you were going to tell us a story about you had the side effects slide up, and then you're going to tell us a story about
yes. Okay.
Plaguing you for 3 months.
Yes, I will get into that. And I hope everyone's having a good time. Okay, cool. So here we are. Okay, so I was telling you guys a story, and all these. Sorry, guys, it's so embarrassing. Okay. So we had this job update, right? This plaguing method. It used to like kill CPU. It was super crazy. Carl from OK Grow, you know this method because he worked with us. Man, that thing was crazy. Like it updated applications collections. It updated the conversations and all the employers that had to know these candidates in the messages. We had to toggle on certain like logs that we were having, like logging. So there's all these side effects. And you can imagine that server code has a bunch of side effects in it, right? When you do some stuff, especially if you're like in a NoSQL world, like if you're keeping things very normalized, there's a lot of side effects that go down, right? And that's just the nature of, software engineering, but we can handle this. We can totally handle this. Like, how do we handle this though? I don't know. Let's find out. There's this thing called the observer pattern, and the observer pattern is a dope pattern. It's a pattern where like an object, it's also known as a subject. It maintains a list of like observers that depend on it, and like you notify these observers anytime a state change happens. So for example, for us, we were not using this pattern. It would have been very helpful to say, okay, when a job is updated, the conversations need to be aware of it, the applications need to be aware of it, and any other person who cares about this state change needs to be aware of it. And that was just lack lack of maturity in our engineering team, and just lack of time. And that's also, that's also hard. But here's like a shitty diagram of like what this looks like. So you have your subject here, right? And you have all these like methods that you say, like notify, or you're adding a listener, you're removing this listener. And whenever a state changes, you call the observer, and the observer will then call its update functions, right? This is a very simple diagram. I also didn't make this diagram. My handwriting is not as bad as this, so just want to let you guys know that. Let's do some code then. So imagine we have this system. We have this thing called hooks, right? Essentially, the side effect is a hook of some server hook, right? And so we have this thing. You have this called hooks.add. It's just a function that you give it a callback, right? You give it a function that you want it to run. You give it a name first, right? Name and a callback. And it registers this name to a global namespace, right? Unfortunately, it's global because this is like Meteor code right here. But if you're in other like JavaScript frameworks and stuff, you'd be using like ES6 or to import and export this stuff. But I don't know. This is an example. And so what this does is it's gonna attach the hook callback to like the overall list of hooks that we've added, right? And so that's that. And generally, you want to say like you want to have like one description of the subject and all the different types of callbacks, right? And I'll get into that next. So here's an implementation, right? So imagine you have a like a blogging site where every time you post something, you want to like send emails with attachments, right? Like maybe the post that you just posted to all your people have like a free coupon code, and you want to send that in an email to everybody who cares about it, right? So what we can do is we don't want to deal with all these processes in submitting a post, right? When you submit a post, you should only be submitting a post because that's the best way to have a testable, isolated code, right? You don't want to submit a post to do all these different side effects for you. And then when everybody in your company leaves and new people come in, they're like, why the hell is submit a post actually doing X, Y, and Z, right? So you want to keep these things separate. And so on the server, we have some API, and it submits a post. It takes the post. It inserts that into the post collection. And then it runs this cool hook. And it runs it asynchronously. So that's another method that you can create. Or you could run it synchronously, but we chose to run async. And we register up here, we register this thing called post.submit.async. And that means this is our subject. So for any time that the hook is run, it's going to take this callback, right? And this callback, if the post has an attachment, will mutate the attachment, will send an email, and will return the post, right? I could have written 5 callbacks here, all put them into this hook, and anytime I submit a post, I'm going to run async all my hooks right here. I thought that was great because I can actually take this function here at the top. I can put that in a module. I can test it independently from any other process. I can dump it in this hook, and now I have a fully tested hook. Then I can unit test this submit post to verify that my hooks are actually running. And I think that's a great way to deal with side effects. And oops, yeah. So that was it. That's it. Thank you for having me. You guys can follow me on Twitter and Medium. I write a lot, and I don't tweet as much, but maybe I should start. And I'm pretty active in the Meteor community and in React. And if you ever want to talk to me, you can. And that's it.
All right. Thanks, Abhi. Okay. So we got some questions here. We can go over those real quick.
Okay.
So David asked, are there any downsides to using a Flux architecture?
Yeah. Okay. So there are some downsides. Okay. So a couple downsides. One downside is it completely changes the way that we've been doing things, right? And what does that do to a team? It slows you down. Do you want to be slow? Probably not. You don't. So that's a big downside. If you've been used to doing things for the last 3 years, this is going to be a big change for you. And, unfortunately, that is not realistic for some companies, and I understand that. So you shouldn't do it. But if you have like the courage and the patience and everything, you can get through it for sure. Um, Another downside is you don't know the future of this pattern, right? It kind of just came out like these patterns have been here for years, but this whole Flux craze has just come out, and with the talks of all this fatigue and stuff, like where what if this changes and then you just spent your time learning something that doesn't even matter, right? So those are some downsides. Other downsides are you have to write there's a lot of overhead to do simple things, right? If I wanted to do a very simple thing like make a button blue in this system, like ideally you just want to mutate some DOM, but using this system you'd still have to go through all the loopholes and stuff. But that's okay because the hard stuff is the same process, right? So if you're doing hard things, it's the same as like it's the hard things are done the same way as the easy things are done. So everything's done the same. So there's no like curveballs or anything. Yeah. Hey David, that's a good question.
Nice. All right. So Dave asks, how does the Flux pattern compare to Mantra from Meteor? And then he points to a link on Kadira's GitHub that talks about
Mm-hmm.
what's inside Mantra. Have
So
you looked at it yet?
of course. Um, so where they actually don't differ that much. Back back before Mantra, Arunoda and I both were attempting to learn Redux because we talked about it and we said like, hey, we should probably like let the architecture decisions happen to other people so we can focus on the meteor stuff, right? Or what we're doing right now in our jobs. And yeah, so I was like, oh yeah, let's learn Redux. He actually put out a small GitHub project called Learn Redux. I don't think he ever published it though. And it was his learnings in Redux, and I did the same thing. I went in my learnings. I actually fell in love with it, and Arnoda said, "Well, there's probably something bigger here with GraphQL. There's something bigger here in with Meteor data. There's something bigger here in all types of other client data management." So that's where Mantra came out. He's like, he wants to have a spec for him to deal with client side interaction, and you can see there's a lot of similar things. There's actions, there's state containers, there's the Arunoda twist on a lot of that. And he's coming from the reasoning of like what he's done at Kadira, the amount of state and the amount of data he has, all his projects in GraphQL, like Mantra is very similar to Flux, but the way it's different is because it's the Arunoda twist. Exactly. It's his spin on things that's also very smart, and it speaks Meteor. Like people who speak Meteor, that is perfect. It's perfect for Mantra. Personally, for my company, we did not go that way. One, because I didn't really see the point of Mantra because I know I just went things the cookie cutter way. Um, our team is very good at Meteor data now. We've done a lot of optimizations. Our client side data with Tracker and all that Blaze stuff, that was our bottleneck. And we resolved that with Flux, and it's been great.
Nice. All right. So next is from Daniel. What kind of projects does Flux make the most sense for? To me, it seems odd to add a lot of complexity. I know a lot of smart people use it, but I don't understand why.
Okay, so Flux is best used for a complex application when you have multiple tables, like multiple tables of data. Like jobs, collections, like for Workpop example, Workpop, jobs, applications, maybe a posts or blogs, like anything that you have a lot of data. I think Flux makes a lot of sense because you're gonna want your users to interact with that data, manipulate it, display it in crazy ways, whatever the investors tell you to do, right? So I think that's the best place for Flux. If you're making a very small app that is maybe like even a single page or something like that, it's overkill. If it's a content driven site, that's overkill. Um, if you just don't, if you just need to hack something together and push it the next day for something, then don't use that. You don't need the overhead. Like if you're trying to accomplish something in a small time, then like yeah, it's not for small apps. Don't do it. If you have a lot of data, I would consider it, or use Mantra or something. But you need an opinion on this for sure.
So it's probably smarter to do like once you find some product market fit and you're growing your user base and probably looking to it more, would you say it more, you feel it kind of evens out your development speed? So rather than like being fast with Blaze and then starting to slow down as your app gets bigger, it's more even keeled and kind of moving into the even pace for development.
Yeah, so I think if I were to like plot it like this, you would actually your time would go up in the beginning for doing things, and then it'll start going drastically down, and then it'll just even out. Exactly what you're saying. So you'll start getting fast, and then you'll hit your plateau because that's just the way you do things now, and then
Mm-hmm.
you just start cruising. It's
Yeah.
great. It's great. It's great stability. It's especially if you have tight deadlines and you want your whole team to be writing something the same way. Like you're not in charge of documentation, right? There's so much in the community. There's so much to read. Like it's great. It's great for that. But some people definitely have their own opinions, which is fine.
Yeah. And so I think we kind of hit on the next question here too, which is it not overwhelming projects at the beginning compared to other patterns like MVC, et cetera? And I feel like maybe any new pattern probably feels overwhelming because you're just learning it, but then
Yeah, yeah,
it's
totally.
not nearly the same later.
Yeah, so for Redux in particular, Redux is very overwhelming in the beginning. It's almost like so overwhelming that you just like that meme where like people just say "f this shit" and they like with the papers flying and they go away. Like that's seriously how it feels. Like the way I learned Redux is I literally took my computer and I banged my head against it until I learned it because that's how hard it was in the beginning. Like it was super overwhelming. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people sugarcoat that. They sugarcoat it because they want you to use it. Like I'll tell you, it's hard. But once I had this moment when I woke up one day and I was like, I'm just gonna build something today. Um, like I was like, okay, I got it. And Dan's videos help. The videos on Egghead, those help a lot. And then reading the documentation helps a lot. And yeah, it got easy. And I saw the comment by Rolf here. Like, I agree with you. Like that is true. Like the middleware and what other people are doing to on top of it. Those also make it more overwhelming because you're not sure exactly what to learn in the beginning.
Hmm. Fair enough.
And then MVC, to answer Robert's question, I think MVC starts out really awesome because it's kind of like really logical in your head. Like it's kind of because it's the way we've been doing things for a long time, and it gets complex down the road when you have so many different new things that you want to add to your app. It gets a little tougher to manage state like that.
Yeah. All right. Oh, this is a good one. Gavin wants to know, would you recommend Redux or Flux Pattern for a React Native app, particularly one that's looking at React Native plus DDP for data?
So I have a mixed opinion about this because my company makes native apps, and we love, like, as sad as this, we love to use REST APIs and stuff for our mobile apps. I know it sounds. We used to do. We still do DDP, right? Our
Mhm.
native apps still do DDP, but our mobile developers are just so in tune with REST and making REST calls that it's just tougher to fight them because they're the ones building that. If they want to do REST, they can. But we've been doing that a lot lately. If I were to build a React Native app today, like right now, I would do a mixture of both DDP for the actual server data, and I would do Redux for client data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Did you see that new speaking of React Native, we'll go a little off script here, but did you see that new IDE yesterday?
No, which one?
Oh gosh.
Is it?
No, it's a great video. It was on Deco, there you go. It was on
Oh yeah.
it was on Crater yesterday. It was the like building the Uber UI in 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. I did see that.
So
Is that called Nuclide or something?
I don't know.
Oh,
I think it's
Deco. Yeah, mistake.
Deco.
My
Yeah,
bad.
it's just
My
Deco.
bad. Yeah,
Yeah,
dude.
you
That's
should
solid.
you should take a look at that. Like I was super impressed. Like that definitely caught my eye yesterday. Anyway,
Nice. So yeah, we answered that question.
yeah.
What
All
up,
right.
though?
Is this all Flux buzz name for pub sub, passive view, supervising presenter, presentation model with a bunch of mediators?
Um, Pub sub. I wouldn't say it's pub sub, so I wouldn't say that. Passive view, supervising. No, not really. Presenter presentation, for sure, right? Presenter presentation for sure. Ludus. But I think the Flux buzz name is kind of what I explained. It's like it's the command pattern. So it really is the command pattern. I didn't invent it, so like you should learn the command pattern because that's essentially what it is. It's nothing more, nothing less. It's not pub sub and it's not passive view supervising. So. And Eric Elliott, if you guys know who Eric Elliott is, he shares the same opinion. He's a big JavaScript blogger, so he talked about this on I think the Changelog or Software Engineering Radio, one of those podcasts. Eric Elliott was on, and he talked about the command pattern and Flux. So don't take my word for it; take his. He has these locks of hair that make him so smart.
Okay. Yeah, we got time. Do you have a preferred library for setting enumerated strings? Since the actions are a set of strings, I would assume you use some sort of enumeration rather than just entering the strings for each action. Is that the case?
So there's not like I don't have a preferred library for like in the open source because at Workpop we created like an enumeration library that just does WP different like Workpop stuff for our strings. So yeah, we do the string enumerations. Do not put your empty naked strings in your code, or I will come and shoot you. Just kidding. That's messed up.
Nice. So Fabio asks, if I'm not wrong, you use the Redux store only for the UI state and keep the domain state in Minimongo. How do you use time travel for the Minimongo changes?
Yo, Fabio, great question, bro. Like, so it's kind of complicated, but this is what we do, and it's just how we do it. So when our domain state hits our component via get meteor data, in the meteor example, we then take that data and we dispatch an initialization to our Redux store that we want to manage state in. And a great example of this is imagine seeing a list of table elements, right? So you have a list of table elements you all got from the server in Meteor. I click on one of them to edit them, right? I click it, I open it, it opens up a form or something, right? When I open up this form, I dispatch to my Redux store the data for the form, okay? Now the form has this data. I can start messing around with it. It's not going to update Minimongo. It's not going to update the server. It's purely in the client. I could navigate to another page and come back. It would still be there if you're not careful. It's kind of like session, Josh. It could creep up on you. But, like But the difference with session is this is namespace, and while session is not like directly namespace. I don't know, it's tough. Anyway, but so now you can then change all the stuff for your internal state in the Redux store, and you can time travel that. And that's what we do to time travel that. Also, you could just do, Meteor methods, right? You can just get your data from a Meteor method, dump it in the store, do all your state changes, and time travel that. So.
Interesting. All right. Last question. Abhi, have you tried Relay yet? There are talks about Relay incorporating good bits from Redux. Since the state of Flux is in Flux, would it make sense to wait some more time until dust settles?
So Relay, Relay, I've answered this question so many times, which is great. I have tried Relay. It is pretty awesome, right? I would compare it. I actually would think the Meteor data experience is better than Relay. But the thing it's lacking is GraphQL, which I think Meteor will resolve pretty soon. But one thing the Relay experience is you're writing GraphQL schemas. You have these container components that then the data that you get from your GraphQL server goes into. Pretty sweet. But for me to grok my head around that took a while. As opposed to when I learned Meteor, I was just like, oh yeah, pub sub, got my data, put it in the UI, good to go. It was that great. Since the state of Flux is in Flux, I would not even think that. I think the Flux library that you choose is better than no Flux library. I don't think you should wait. I think you should always be learning, and you should not be static. Like, don't wait for Relay. Don't wait for reactive GraphQL. Just keep learning stuff. And on the side, maybe try these things out if you don't have the time right now.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. That's great advice.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Cool.
I want to say thank you, Abhi, for giving the talk and answering all these questions. Really appreciate having you on here.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. All right.
Appreciate it. Hopefully everyone had a good time.
Yeah. I learned something, so that's good.
I see you, Ben Strahan. I see you.
Yeah. Ben's up next. We'll take a short break, and we will be back in about 9 minutes with Ben's talk. Thanks for watching, guys.
Bye.
This video has been a Space Dojo production. You can click the Learn More button to find out more about us at spacedojo.com. Or you can click the subscribe button to get notified about new videos we put out each week. Thanks for watching.